Hey OCYG, welcome back to our YouTube class on spiritual disciplines. My name's Emily, and this whole month we have been talking about spiritual disciplines, and we've learned a lot along the way. We have learned that spiritual disciplines are not just for spiritual giants, they are for you and for me and for anybody who is just willing to give them a try. And they're kind of like just these little tools that can help us connect to God in a new way or a different way, and they're really not that complicated. They're just pretty simple, and they help us focus in on our spiritual life in different areas. So the first week we talked about the discipline of celebration and how celebrating the gifts that God has given us can actually bring us closer to Him. And then we talked about the discipline of simplicity and how simplifying our lives inwardly, just like in our minds and our hearts, focusing on Jesus can really benefit us and then kind of center us a little bit. And then also simplifying our lives outwardly is something that God calls us to, and just not having tons of possessions that we don't need. And so we really dove into that. And then last week we talked about prayer, and it does not get much more basic than prayer. Prayer is the way that we communicate with the Lord, and we went over just some different and maybe new ways that we can change up our prayer life. And we talked about the value of prayer and why we pray. So if you missed any of those videos, they're still on our YouTube channel, the OCYG YouTube channel. But this week we are talking about our last spiritual discipline, and it is the discipline of worship. Worship is so important, and if we are going to be trying to live for God and trying to be a Christian and be a light to other people, worship has got to be a priority in our life. And so we're going to really unpack this, but I want to start by getting us thinking about worship, and I want to ask you, what is one of your favorite worship experiences that you have ever had? Try to think about one that sticks out, and then why did you enjoy it so much? One of the best worship experiences you've ever been a part of, and why'd you enjoy it? I totally wish right now that we were in the same room so I could hear your responses, because I would be super curious to hear what experience comes to mind first for you. But worship is a spiritual discipline. And so as we're getting started, I want to read Matthew 4:10. It says, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and only Him shall you serve." So it says, you shall worship the Lord. I don't know how many of you guys know this about me. Probably a lot of you know that I grew up at Otter Creek. I have been at Otter Creek since I was 2 years old, and I was in OCYG when I was a teenager. And I loved youth group. I loved it so much, and it was so formative for me, and I really just had so many amazing memories and relationships from OCYG. But David was actually my youth minister, and I have several really vivid memories of him talking to us about worship. And I think he just wanted to get us thinking a little deeper about it, and maybe thinking about it in a more mature way. But I remember him talking to us about how, worship, it's not all about how the band sounds or how the singing sounds. Like if the singing is off or if something's off musically, that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't just be like having you thinking like, oh, this sounds so bad. Just think about how you're worshiping. And then he also talked to us about how it's not all about them playing your favorite song or singing your favorite song. Sometimes when I was a teenager, and honestly, sometimes still now, if they play a song that I don't really like that much in a worship setting, sometimes I'll be like, I don't really want to sing for this one, or I'll kind of just tune it out for that song. And worship is all about connecting to God. And we've probably all had a ton of different worship experiences in our life, worshiping on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights or at camp or at a conference or something. And, every single worship opportunity is an equal opportunity to connect to the Lord in a really intimate way. So it's not about how the singing sounds. It's not about if they play your favorite song. It is about connecting to God. And I'm so thankful that David taught me that lesson when I was a teenager, because it has still stuck with me, and I still have to keep reminding myself of those things. I love how worship is often happening through song, because songs in general like evoke so much emotion in us. Like, have you ever been in your car and or anywhere and you've heard a song that's made you cry? I definitely have cried to certain songs before, or maybe it's in a worship song that's made you cry. Songs can make us cry, songs can make us dance, songs can make us laugh, songs can get us all hype, it's like different music has that effect on us. And so I love that God has given us worship as an avenue of connecting to Him, because it is emotional. It's an emotional thing. Like some worship songs, you may be feeling joyful. Some seasons you're worshiping, you may be feeling sad. But it is a really emotional experience, or it can be. No matter what the emotion is, there's normally emotion involved in it. The Psalms command us to sing unto the Lord 41 different times in the book of Psalms. You can go back and check me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's 41 times that the Psalms command us to sing to the Lord. And it's kind of fitting, because Psalms are actually songs that were written, and each psalm, like each chapter, is a song. So it makes sense that they would command us to sing unto the Lord, or that would be kind of a theme in that book. But songs are a big feature of praise in the Bible, I would say. I want to read Hebrews 13:15. It says, "Offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to His name." I'm going to read that one more time. Offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to His name. A lot of you have probably been to camp at Otter Creek. If we were in the room, I'd say raise your hand if you've been to camp before. And something that's special about Otter Creek's church camp every summer is that the worship is incredible. It's a highlight, definitely. And oftentimes I hear students saying, or adults saying, that worship at camp is just the best. It is the best. Nothing can top it. And I always wonder, why is that? And I've thought about it a lot. And the answer that I have come up with about why camp worship is just the best worship is because at camp, our hearts are ready to encounter God. Like, we are expecting to connect with Him. We are knowing we're going to connect with Him before worship even starts at night. And at camp, we have something called holy expectancy. And this is what I want to talk about. A main thing we were going to focus on is we're talking about the spiritual discipline of worship and what it is, what it means. Holy expectancy is something that people had in the Bible when they worshiped. And it is basically just gathering with anticipation and knowing that you're coming into the presence of God, believing that God is going to teach you something or touch your heart in some way through that worship experience. And holy expectancy is something that we can have when we are worshiping in a gathering, but it's also something that we can have in our everyday life. So there's kind of these two different parts of holy expectancy, and they do connect. They are kind of intertwined. So the idea of having holy expectancy, not just in a worship gathering, but in our everyday life. When I was, first understanding this concept, I was like, well, how do we have holy expectancy in our everyday life? I understand the worship gathering, but how do we have it in our everyday life? And this, I've been basing this whole series on a book called Celebration of Discipline. It's all about spiritual disciplines. And in that book, they talk about when you have holy expectancy in your everyday life, it often looks like just communicating with God all the time. And just kind of forming a habit of constant conversation with Him. Because when we're going throughout our day, we can be filled with inward worship and inward adoration for the Lord, adoring Him. And when we go to work and when we go to school and when we eat and then when we sleep and all the things we do, we're kind of naturally listening to God and having conversation with Him. And then when we're hearing our thoughts, hearing our prayers throughout the week, we know God's hearing our prayers. And then when we're also hearing His voice throughout the week, then when we're doing that throughout our week, then we will definitely hear his voice when we're gathering with other people to worship. Does that make sense? It's kind of the idea of like, if we are communicating with God in our everyday life and kind of inwardly worshiping him and thanking him for things every day, then it's like going to be supernatural for us to have that connection with him when we worship with a group of people. A verse that I thought went along with this idea was Romans 8:4. It says, walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. So as we're walking throughout our week, we're not just thinking about things of our flesh or things of the world. We're thinking about spiritual things all the time. The author of the book, Celebration of Discipline, says, when God had graciously spoken to me in dozens of little ways throughout the week, he certainly spoke to me in church services as well. So basically, praise and singing is definitely a way to worship, but it's not the only way. It is not the only way. We can also worship God throughout our week. And a phrase that kind of describes this that I've heard a lot is like, worship is a lifestyle. So worship is a lifestyle. You're worshiping constantly. You're communicating with God constantly, and then you have those special times where you also gather with others. I've in the other videos that we've done about spiritual disciplines, I have asked you guys some questions, and often I've encouraged you to write down your answers, because obviously you're going to watch this video, but I want you to think about this past the video. I want you to spend a lot of your time this week thinking about this discipline and trying to practice it. So as you go throughout the rest of your week, I want you to write down these 3 questions that I'm about to ask you, and then think about your answers to them. Pray about them. Journal about them. There's 3 questions. And the first question is, how do you worship God in your daily life? How do you do that? How do you worship God in your daily life? The second question is, how has your worship changed over the last 5 to 10 years? How has your worship changed over the last 5 to 10 years? Think about that. And then describe worship in a couple of words, maybe 5 words or less. Describe worship in a few words. So those questions, I'll repeat them one more time. And these are questions that I want you to write down and think about and kind of, reflect on throughout your week. How do you worship God in your daily life? How has your worship changed in the last 5 to 10 years? And then describe worship in 5 words or less. Those are your 3 questions. As we are wrapping up our video, I want to give you some practical things that you can do this week. And I'm really big on practical application because I want something that I can go and do. So the first piece of practical application is those questions that you wrote down. Go ahead and think about those, reflect on those throughout your week. But I want to give you a few more steps that you can do this week to lead you into worship. And so there's 4 of them. There's 4 of them, and hopefully these will be helpful for you as you are entering into this discipline. The first one is, I want you to spend time with God daily. Connect to God's daily this week. Really, really try to follow Paul's words when he says, pray without ceasing. Just connect to God this week. Connect to him every day. Talk to him every day. That's going to help lead you into worship and prepare your mind and your heart for worship. The second thing, the step towards worship, is have multiple different ways that you worship this week. Maybe you worship God when you're alone. Maybe you listen to some music in your room, or music in the car, or maybe you're praying in your room as an act of worship and kind of inwardly praying with God. Maybe you join a small group of people and have a little Bible study with your friends. That's an act of worship. Have a little gathering. Or maybe it's just a genuine conversation where you're talking with someone about worship. All these little experiences, these little things that you do throughout your week will empower you and impact you when you are entering into those larger worship gatherings. So connect to God every day. And then the second thing, it kind of builds on the first one, is have multiple ways that you're connecting to Him. And then the third one is live with holy expectancy this week. Expect that you're going to encounter God. Like, know that He is with you and that He is going to be working in your life before you even get out of bed in the morning. Know that God's going to show up in mighty ways. And then the last thing you can do this week to enter into worship is come to our worship night on Wednesday night. OCYG is having a worship night. It's student-led. It's going to be at the Pavilion from 7 to 8 on Wednesday. And I really hope that you will be there. And I hope that you will enter with holy expectancy. It kind of just worked out really well that we're having a worship night. We're hosting a worship night for our youth group on the week that we are focusing on worship and focusing on this spiritual discipline. So, I know I've thrown a lot at you and we've talked about worship in a lot of ways, but I do hope and pray that this will give you something to think about and that your worship will grow in some way. And I just hope that you will, more than anything, have a sense of holy expectancy this week as you are walking through your life. Expect to encounter God in little things, in big things, and I hope to see you on Wednesday night. I have loved talking about spiritual disciplines with you, and the last thing I'll say is if you have felt like these spiritual disciplines have been helpful for you, and if you want to talk about more of them with me, I would love that. So if you want to, call me or text me, we can continue having a discipline each week that we focus on. And there are lots more disciplines than just the 4 that we've talked about, but this has hopefully given you a taste of what they are and what they're like. So I love you guys, and I hope to see you on Wednesday.